Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for choosing Across the Fence. I'm Will Michael. Ben Franklin often gets credit for the quote, "There are two certainties in life, death and taxes." Well, regardless of who said it and when, the reality is that this time of year is definitely the tax season. So today we're calling on Vermont's tax commissioner. We're going to learn about any tax changes and help you understand the key things that can make your tax return go smoothly. I'm pleased to welcome Tax Commissioner Kaj Samsom. Commissioner, thank you for coming in.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
I suspect you often have a difficult and sometimes thankless job. So today we're just spending time learning, educating folks about their income taxes. Again, appreciate you coming in.
Great to be here.
Beginning of the tax season, you want to discuss, I know, some of the benefits of free filing and e-filing, but it is the beginning of the season. What do we need to know?
Well, yeah, the IRS actually opened to receive electronic filings today, and Vermont is linked to when that opens up. But yeah, it's the beginning of the season. People are getting their W-2s and their 1099s and organizing all their tax information. So we're happy to be here to talk about what's new this year, of which there is quite a bit new this year, and also talk about people's options for filing. So about half of Vermonters use a preparer, a paid preparer, or even a family member, and the other half do what we call self-preparing, and that can be using the old paper booklet and filling it in by hand, or using fillable forms that we have online, or using a at-home software package that you either pay for, or to your earlier point, with the free file, there are some free options as well.
So our director, Ryan Wilson, has put up the free tax help. This is Free File. What is it and who's eligible?
So Free File is a partnership with software vendors, which many people use, many people pay for self-prepared. But it's a partnership with the IRS and the states where with certain income, sometimes it's age and military, it depends on the vendor, but it's a partnership to allow certain populations to use that software for free to file both their state and their federal taxes electronically.
Other tax assistance that's available to taxpayers?
Yeah, so there are a lot of programs out there. VITA and AARP are a couple of them. We've have those resources on our website for people to explore. And that's the type of, when you're using something like Free File or purchasing a software package, you're still preparing it yourself. Those other programs allow you to get some one-on-one assistance, which for many taxpayers, I'd say almost for most taxpayers, is very beneficial and sometimes critical. We are in an environment that, like it or not, where taxes are extremely complicated, and I really encourage folks to think about getting assistance, whether it's volunteer assistance or looking into a tax preparer. So it's important to look at those options for free advice or even paid advice to make sure you navigate this properly.
So a lot of taxpayers, and thus our viewers, do know about this already. There's Free File, then there's e-file.
Right.
So let's take a moment to talk about e-file, how that works and who's eligible.
So, e-file, everyone's eligible. So if you're using a paid preparer, almost exclusively everything they will submit is e-filed, electronically filed. It is very secure. It certainly processes faster at both the IRS and at the Vermont Department of Taxes. In fact, I brought some statistics today. Last year, for those that e-filed, the average refund time was 28 days, and 75% of those people that e-filed got their refund within 30 days. And then for those that paper filed, which is the only other option besides e-file, the average refund time was 40 days, so almost 2 weeks longer, and a little more than half, 58% of paper filers got their refund within 30 days. So there are a lot of benefits to e-file. the number one benefit is speed and accuracy. So when a paper filing comes into the department, if you looked at our kind of mail intake process, it's literally crates and crates full of paper, and the potential for error both in the processing and in the scanning and then in the reading and the digitizing of that information, it creates a lot of risk of error, and we see a higher error rate. So folks really should consider e-filing, whether it's through the Free File Alliance, through a paid prepare, or through a self-prepared product that they purchase off the shelf.
Now, before people file, it is important to underscore not to file too early.
Right.
That there's certain things that people need.
Yep.
A lot of this is review, but can you touch on what are those things we need before we file our taxes?
Yeah, so the two main areas that touch on most, or the two main forms that people need to wait patiently for, that touch on most types of income, are your 1099s, which is a whole group of forms that you can see here. Actually, what you see here is a W-2 as well. The W-2 is wage income. It shows you the wages you earned at one or many jobs. You get one for each employer, and the 1099 can show anything from interest income to miscellaneous income if you're a contract worker. And if you've had taxes withheld, you'll need those numbers as well to input or to give to your preparer. What we see every year is that some folks are very anxious or in a rush to get their refund. So they think they have everything, they file, they send it off, and when it hits our system, there's something missing, because we have the capability to do a lot of data matching. So we're waiting for the employer and the banks to send the exact same information electronically to us so that we can verify it. And if there's something missing there, it actually causes a great delay, because then it gets put into a work list, and then there's a communication that happens. So I think for folks that are really want to get their refund faster, the number one step they can do is accuracy and wait for everything to come in. And another check is that if nothing major has changed in where you get your income, look at what you filed last year. If you had a successful filing season the prior year, look at last year's filing. Look at the sources of income and interest and stuff that you had, and make sure for each one of those you have the same form this year. And then you're pretty sure you're complete and ready to go.
Now, tax rules, tax laws do change in every state year to year. They change at the federal level based on the actions of our legislature or a governor. There's four key things. Take us through some of the changes. The first one being changes to Vermont's tax calculation.
Right. Vermont had a major change this year, and it was in response to an even larger change at the federal level. That was the Tax Cut and Jobs Act that was signed in December of 2017, and it was effective for all of tax year 2018. At the federal level, that was the biggest change in, I think, 35 years, since the mid-'80s, when the tax code had been revised in a major way for individual payers. So because of how Vermont's tax calculation is linked and kind of borrows numbers and carries them over from the federal calculation, when the federal calculation went through that dramatic change, Vermont had to adjust accordingly. And what we did was we took the opportunity to introduce some simplicity, make it a little less complex, got rid of some forms, and introduce some new features as well.
So that's what folks will see on Form 111.
Yep, the IN 111 is kind of your Vermont 1040, and that's a good image of the new form there.
Now, another change you brought along were the actual changes in the form itself.
Yeah.
So what are we going to see there?
Well, you just saw it there. That was the form, and so
Okay.
I think from a legal and from a form perspective, one of the major changes is that instead of relying on the federal standard deduction and the federal personal exemption, which at the federal level, the personal exemption went to 0, which would have had some negative consequences for some Vermonters. We put those into Vermont law. So now you have a Vermont standard deduction and a Vermont personal exemption, and the amounts of those are very much like what the federal used to be before the big change.
We talked before the program. One of the notes you shared with me was the charitable contribution tax credit. So there's some changes there, but you might also describe what that is and who utilizes it.
Yeah, so we'll find out. This is the first year that Vermonters, all Vermonters that have a tax liability have the opportunity to take a contribution credit or a credit for qualified charitable contributions. Before this change and before this tax year, it was only if you itemized deductions on the at the federal level that you would have the opportunity to get some type of tax advantage, either a deduction or a credit for charitable contributions. So this year, what we did in the Vermont calculation is say, let's not just, when we revise things, let's not just limit it to those that itemize at the federal level. Let's give a broad-based credit. So every Vermonter who gives money to a charitable organization, that can be church, school, nonprofit organization, can take 5% of that donation, and that includes non-cash donations to places like Goodwill, food shelves, and things like that. They can take 5% of that value and take it as an income tax credit, which is a dollar-for-dollar reduction in your tax liability. We're one of just 2 or 3 states that have a broad-based credit like that. Again, prior to this change at the federal and state level, only about 30% of Vermonters would have been in that population that itemizes deductions and therefore keeps receipts and thinks about their charitable giving from a tax perspective. So we're really taking the opportunity to talk to all Vermonters that, keep your receipts, think about your charitable giving. There's some tax advantage for you.
Commissioner, we're flying through the time. We have about a minute left. One of the other big changes was Social Security. Can you give us a nutshell what's going on there?
Yeah, pay attention there. Social Security is partly taxed at the federal level, and before this big change in Vermont, anything that was taxed in the federal level slid over to the Vermont calculation. This year there's an extra exemption in Vermont, so we're joining the majority of states. And the population that needs to pay attention, if you're married filing jointly and have less than $70,000 of total income, or single with less than $55,000 of total income, you're going to get a break or a complete exemption of the taxability of your Social Security income.
It's a huge help for Vermonters who receive income through Social Security.
Yeah, about half of the Vermonters that were paying some tax on their Social Security income in Vermont, about half of them will see a reduction or a full elimination of the tax effect there.
I do need to jump in there because we're just about out of time. We've been able to touch on some key topics, and I want to point out for our viewers they can get more information through the resources that we're going to put on the screen. The website is among the most important, tax.vermont.gov, and there's also the main number 828-2505. Commissioner, I want to thank you very much for coming in. Very enlightening.
Yeah.
That is our program for today. We know you have choices, so thanks for choosing us. I'm Will Michael, inviting you to join us back here each weekday afternoon for another visit Across the Fence.